Welcome back to install number 6. And today we're going to talk about game day and post-game day interventions. So some of the practices, some of the interventions, some of the philosophies, principles that may go into both game day and the immediate actions following game day. So let's start with some game day strategies. So obviously if you're part of a football team, there's going to be some sort of nutritional interventions pre-game. So whether that be a pre-game meal, if you're in a college professional standpoint, or it might be, maybe promoting, or if you can somehow fundraise and provide a pregame meal if you're in the high school setting, trying to educate and provide opportunities for your athletes to be consistent with that pregame meal, to try to individualize and allow opportunities for them to actually select foods that fit well or best kind of sit in their stomachs pregame. But what we want to do pregame nutritional intervention wise is to emphasize carbohydrates, a moderate level of proteins, low amounts of fat, and hydration. So obviously we want to feel for competition. And if we can have this pregame nutrition be consistent from week in, week out, and allow our athletes to have some individual bandwidth within those meals, that will be ideal. It's also important for us as coaches to promote that our athletes actually apply some of those pregame nutritional interventions during the week as well, so they understand how their body responds to certain foods, and we can get into a consistent method or consistent mode in this pregame intervention. I know a lot of teams have some sort of walkthrough or some sort of meetings or whether it be on field or in the classroom walkthroughs with their players. One strategy that may be effective is some sort of video feedback. So prior to a game, during a walkthrough during the morning or a couple hours before the game, showing footage of their athletes or their players having successful execution of some sort of play. It could be a little highlight film, etc. So what this is actually shown to do is actually improve hormone priming, primarily testosterone concentrations increase by doing this. And this can have a positive benefit on performance, on subsequent performance. What you wanted to avoid if you're going to do some sort of video feedback is to avoid film of the opposing team or players with kind of cautionary feedback. Be aware of this player's speed. And you're kind of setting this negative connotation in your player's head. So I know a lot of coaches use video. This is a good time to maybe implement some sort of highlight film or implement showing our athletes that they can execute these skills successfully from previous weeks. I know this is becoming more and more popular now, but the use of some sort of potentiation method or intervention pregame, and there is some literature and science to support that some sort of lift or resistance training you use anywhere from 4 to 6 hours before a game may have some benefits or some potentiation effects for a game. Obviously, this is again something that we need as coaches. We need to implement during the off season, during spring ball, during certain sessions during the off season, so our athletes are accustomed to this. I personally prefer the day before potentiation type lift on that Fast Friday, more so than a game on game day. But this is something that has been seen with the success in power repeated sprint activities, and maybe something to think about, especially if you're in a high school where I know around where I'm at, I have a lot of my athletes have strength on Fridays. It's just part of their class schedule, and they're expected to participate in those classes. And what we've worked with some of the coaches in our area is to implement some sort of pre-game potentiation lift. That way they're potentiating for the game and not fatiguing their athletes before the game. But again, another method that may increase that acute potentiation of speed, power, strength, etc. So now that we actually get to the actual pregame and warm up, a question that, again, this might be one for strength coaches that have a little more say in. I know a lot of the coaches here are part of this mock season are strength coaches, but do you really need 60 to 75 minutes to warm up? Do our athletes need to be on the field an hour and 15 minutes? Does the first group, the first wave of athletes, need to be on the field 75 minutes before the game? Is this actually turning into a negative aspect for our athletes? Is it inducing too much fatigue? Is it inducing too much time on their feet and nervousness in our athletes? What is the point of being our athletes get out in the field and warming up for 75 minutes before a game? Can we cut back the fat? Can we eliminate all the unnecessary time spent on our athletes' feet and on the field where they're in their pads? They're probably getting nervous. They're probably working out some of that nervous tension. They're kind of fatiguing themselves. They're etc. Can we eliminate that as much as possible? One of the goals, I think, of a warm-up should be, hey, can we complete that warm-up as close to the start of the competition as possible? I mean, I've seen teams go out on the field with 75 minutes till game and then go back in the locker room with 20 minutes left in the clock. So now our athletes are, after the warm-up, are sitting in the locker room for 20 minutes before the game actually starts. 20 minutes before the clock hits zero. That's just too much time, and it's actually a time frame where athletes are actually now losing the benefits or the effects of that warm-up period. So can we stay on the field as long as possible and conclude that warm-up as close to the start as possible? Finally, I think many of the warm-ups should include some sort of small-sided games, especially that are short, intense, that are working on technical, tactical aspects of the competition of the game. And again, there is research to support that small-sided games actually enhance the subsequent performance, obviously for those technical and tactical reasons. So can we actually do 8 to 10 plays of Skelly, good on good? Can we do 8 to 10 plays of team, good on good, where we're playing with a little bit of speed? Obviously, we're staying safe, we're staying on our feet. Can we do some things small-sided game-wise, one-on-ones, half Skelly, etc., that allow our athletes to interact with the information, that allow our athletes to interact with the technical, tactical components of that sport, because that will then prepare them for the realities of the game. I think sometimes pre-game warm-ups before a football game or any sport in general are a little bit too watered down. It's a little bit too on air, a little bit too no actual competition. And so what happens is, when the game is played at a level 10, but our warm-up's at a level 4 or level 5, there's a huge gap there. I think small-sided games or some of those one-on-one competitions are a way to close that gap. So we're actually giving our athletes exposure to that closer representative level, that closer reality where sport lives during the pregame. Halftime. Halftime is a clear opportunity for a competitive advantage. I think teams have gotten better and better at this over the years, but this should not be passive. Each team should have a specific and detailed plan of what they want to do during halftime. And here's some clear reasons why. About 20% of athletes have their least intense 15 minutes of play following halftime. Skilled actions and actually are attenuated or reduced after halftime. The first 15 to 20 minutes post halftime is one of the highest areas, the highest times or highest risk of injuries that athletes have. Those 15 to 20 minutes. Why? Because many times athletes are actually cooling themselves down. They're not maintaining their warmth. They're not maintaining their tissue resiliency. They're sitting on their butts for 20 minutes. They've lost some of the technical, tactical, and physical kind of arousal that they had during, obviously, the first half, and then halftime is a chance where you lose on it. Those athletes are losing those things out. So what should we do during halftime to have or give ourselves more of a competitive advantage? A is to maintain heat, right? There's heat maintenance strategies. So can we keep our players warm when they're in the locker room? So can we actually turn up the temperature in our locker room? Can we do things, can we put layers of clothes on our athletes? Can we keep them somewhat active, maybe during those first 5 to 10 minutes? But are there heat maintenance strategies that we can give our athletes? Hot towels, hot packs, etc. We need to give our athletes some sort of carbohydrate and hydration during this time. And what we may find is actually low GI, glycemic index carbohydrates may be better than higher ones. So that 20 to 70 range, what this may do is actually limit kind of the hypoglycemic rebound during the second half. So they don't have this huge spike and this crash in the second half. So low to moderate GI may be better than high. And traditionally people thought about high GI is the way to go. Same thing as before the game. Maybe there's a chance for now to review successful play during the first half. Again, to get that hormonal priming, that increase of testosterone. Caffeine has been shown to be very beneficial. So whether it be a caffeine chew, and then, like I said, carbohydrates. We got to give our athletes some sort of carbohydrates, whether it be things like honey, a fruit, granola bars, a Gatorade, a mouth rinse. Those have all been shown to be very beneficial during this halftime. And then finally, coaches need to be on task and on time to get our athletes back out in the field for re-warm up. A huge pet peeve of mine as a player and watching is that when our football players are coming back on the field with 2 minutes left during halftime to get warmed up before the second half. We need to give our athletes adequate time to get back out there, to do an organized re-warm up, to do organized, maybe again, one-on-ones, half skelly, taking snaps, getting plays, to again calibrate the technical, tactical, and physical kind of attributes that we need our athletes to possess in the second half. So we need to give our athletes adequate time to re-warm up. And here's kind of if you got 15 minutes, most halftimes now are between 15 and 20 minutes. Here's what it may look like for our athletes during those 15 minutes, how we're breaking it down. As we talked about last week, now we're going to go into post-game. We know post-game recovery can vary widely in how long it takes. And it's very subjective. It's individualized from subjective fatigue to neuromuscular fatigue to how our body actually physically functions from strength post-game. It all varies. But what we can do is, what has been shown is that taking post-game interventions can expedite this process. So what can we do post-game? I think within that first, right after the game to 1 hour, we need to be pushing, if we're able to, if we're in a college setting, professional setting, we need to be pushing nutrition. We need to get our athletes 20 to 40 grams of protein with 60 to 80 grams of carbohydrate, if not more. They need to have a post-game assessment with medical staff so we can take care of body weight loss. We can do a body screen in terms of nicks and dings, and we can start to implement some of these recovery modalities. We need to get, again, the science, and I'll show here in a second, the science is very strong on things like compression gear, in terms of water immersion, whether it be cold water immersion, whether it be contrast immersion, etc. Things like sauna may be, for some of our athletes, may be a beneficial intervention post-game. Light massage, but we can start and initiate that recovery process right after the game. Might save us hours or even a full day on that back end if we take care of it. That 1 to 3 hours after the game, they should be having a full meal. We need to be pushing our athletes a full meal. If we can provide those things, great. If they're off with their families or back at the cafeteria or wherever it may be, we need to be educating them that they need to have a lot of carbohydrates, a lot of calories, and a lot of protein. And again, keeping on compression garments during this time. And then before bed, a high protein shake, specifically casein protein, to have that long release protein there. And again, 30 to 50 grams of low GI carbs. Other things like supplements like this tart cherry juice has been shown to be very beneficial. Creatine, omega-3s, vitamin D, and then vitamin C and collagen is another one that they should be probably supplementing with every single day. And then one of the primary goals that we need to give our athletes is 8 to 10 hours of sleep. And we'll talk about how we can do this. And obviously, we all know the benefits of sleep, but we have to provide that window of opportunity for our athletes to get sleep. And we have to emphasize and educate the importance of that sleep that night after a game. So this is talking about, obviously, initiating that recovery interventions post-game. And how this intervention, this post-game recovery intervention, may be one of the most important aspects to give our athletes recovery during that next now 48 to 96 hour window. If we can do things for that 0 to 3 hour window post game, may save us a lot of time in that back half. And this may be something that we need to actually do a better job of as coaches. Again, here's some ways that they've shown it to be beneficial. But again, immediately post-exercise, whether it be active recovery, cold water immersion, compression garments, these have been shown to be better than just passive or letting our athletes go home or just hopping in a bus, etc. These are all things that can help our athletes recover and that way be in a state, be more prepared for that following practice week. So if we're at an away game, again, We talked about compression garments. Compression garments worn during the post-game flights or travel or buses. I know whether played, in college or professionally or overseas, we'd have routinely, 3 to 5 hour bus rides, plane rides, train rides, etc. post game. Getting our athletes to wear compression garments during that time has been shown to be very beneficial in terms of enhancing the neuromuscular recovery and perceived recovery. Sleep quality and quantity and perceived recovery are all reduced after night games. So if you're playing a night game, especially we were talking about high school, the quality and the quantity of sleep is obviously going to be reduced. You're ending games at 9, 10 p.m. Your athletes are all high on adrenaline. The sleep and the quality and the quantity is going to be reduced after those night games. So as a coach, we have to be aware of what we're asking our athletes the following day. Subjective, measures, much more than objective measures, seem to be of greater use to inform individual player preparedness decision making the following day or following weeks. So again, we can do those objective measures, but really having a good relationship with your athletes and having that kind of feedback from your athletes is more powerful than having some of the technology to take objective measures. So what does this timeline might look like the following day? Personally, I wouldn't ask my athletes to check in the following morning. We talked about the importance of sleep. Well, as a coach, we need to do our due justice to allow them a window to sleep. So if we want our athletes to get 8 to 10 hours of sleep, but we're asking them to come in at 8 a.m. or even 9 a.m. the following morning to do a weightlifting session or do film session, I think we're actually, we're hurting our athletes. We're being a little bit, hypocritical by asking our athletes to come in early, but we want them to get sleep. It doesn't go hand in hand. So we have to allow our athletes, I'd say, the whole morning off to allow that opportunity to get sleep. We could talk about seeing the medical staff to take care of injuries, things like that. Again, the stuff that we did after the game also holds some benefit the following day. Massage, water immersion, light massage, sauna can all be beneficial. And then what's common now, recovery lifts. Some people like that. Personally, I was a big fan of that. But now I'm going to the thought process of maybe having that following day completely off. The science and literature is showing that those recovery lifts, active recovery the following day after a game, is actually showing to be no more beneficial nor more positive on the 48 to 96 hours post game than if they just had the completely off. So I'm going more towards the route now to have that completely off, give my athletes a complete off day, not only from a physical regeneration standpoint, but from a mental, emotional standpoint as well, as we'll get in here a second here. And this is it. Recovery is not just physical. It's mental, it's emotional, it's psychological. Being around the same people 7 days a week, around your coaches, being bombarded by football or the tactical aspects of sport is a fatigue in itself. I think letting our athletes have a complete day away from football and its responsibilities and activities of football is very, very powerful and beneficial. So in many cases, I think that Saturday after a high school game or a Sunday after a college game can be very beneficial to give our athletes just a complete day off, not ask them to come in, not ask them to do a recovery lift, not ask them to review film as a unit. We can save that for the following day if that's a must. But I think we need to find at least one day during the week where we give our athletes a complete and total day free from football activities to allow that the whole battery, not just the physical battery, but the mental, emotional, psychological, social battery to be recharged by not asking them to be involved with football activities. So here's our homework. A couple things for you guys to think about and design up. So if you have a 1 p.m. game, this is probably more geared towards college coaches. If you have a 1 p.m. game and obviously your athletes don't have anything before that, how would you design, what would your schedule look like leading up to the game? If you have a night game, maybe you're a college coach or a high school coach. If you're a college coach, you have a 7 p.m. game, and maybe your players don't have anything throughout the day. How do you schedule in that day? You're a high school coach, and you have a 7 p.m. game, and obviously your kids are in school till 3 p.m. How do you design a schedule from 3 p.m. to 7 p.m.? So think about how are you designing that lead up into game day. Think about how you might design a pregame warm-up. If you were in charge, you had 100% control, how would you construct that pregame warm-up? When would the first unit go out in the field? How long is the warm-up? When are we getting off the field? All those type of things. What would the activities during warm-up actually look like? And then finally, design a post-game, if in a perfect world, or in the world that you live in, how would you design a post-game schedule? Whatever you have at your disposal, whatever budget, whatever interventions, nutritionally or not, athletic training room rise or not, how would you design a post-game schedule that would work maybe at your home games and also on the road? What do these things look like? What can you provide for your athletes to, again, expedite that recovery process post-game? So that's it for today, guys. It's a short and sweet one, but we're talking about pre-game, game day, and post-game day activities. What are some interventions and things that you could be doing better that will provide your athletes with the best opportunity for development, recovery, and obviously performance? See you guys next week.